Welcome everybody. My name is Amanda Ellis. I'm doing the Moderator. I also represent the Arizona State University to Wrigley Global Futures Provider. It's my great pleasure to be here with you all at Istanbul today with a very esteemed group of international panelists. I'd like to begin with a Maori greeting, which is the indigenous language of the Maori Island. Like I just greeted you all as important leaders, and I greeted you 3 times, as is the tradition. Once for the ancestors who are always with us in terms of their legacy, once for all of you important people in the room, and once for future generations. Indigenous wisdoms always think 7 generations ahead. And as we gather today to talk about the climate crisis and the importance of education for livable futures, it is so critical that we think about you and your futures. So I'm delighted to introduce our 3 panelists. Each will present for 5 minutes, and then we'll have a series of questions and an exchange with you on the floor. So online with us today, we have the United Kingdom of the Control of Hawaii, Midori, who is also an environmental lawyer, who worked with the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, known by its acronym NOAA in the US. And she played an extremely important role in terms of marine national monuments. It was, in fact, the largest marine monument in the world, and still the largest in the United States. Second, online, we have with us Professor THEODOSSIU, who is an engineer and a water resources expert. He is director of multi-graduate program Protection of the Environment and Sustainable Development. So we'll have some very interesting professorial insights to share. And last but definitely not least, with us here in the room today is a former minister and member of parliament for 3 decades from Ireland, climate minister, environment minister, energy minister, communications minister. This man plays a number of very important roles, and he currently chairs the Inter-Parliamentary Union Science and Technology Working Group. For those of you who don't know, the Inter-Parliamentary Union is the world's oldest multilateral body. It has 181 member countries out of the 193 members of the United Nations. So a very important body, and we're just delighted to have you with us today, Denis. So I'm going to start by asking Midori, who has had a lot of experience in the field, tell us a little bit about her background as an environmental lawyer and what she thinks is important in terms of education for this existential climate crisis that we are currently experiencing. Midori, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amanda, and aloha, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very humbled to be here and engaged in this important conversation. My background is in environmental law. I graduated from school and went right to Asia to practice environmental law, which surprised people because it wasn't really a thing then. But I've carried on and had some wonderful experiences learning and practicing in this area in Asia, the Pacific, and around the world doing different projects for the World Bank and in the Oslo Paris Commission, who takes care of the marine environment for the North Atlantic. And so here I am in Hawaii and been asked this very important question about the future and what it is that we could best use in education to help us on this combating this climate challenge and this changed world that we are now living in. I deal a lot in the Pacific, and you can see very readily what is happening to our communities here and on the other islands or in the Pacific. So when I think of what we need in our education, first and foremost, I think we need real good critical thinking skills across the board for no matter what subject matter we need to upscale. It's those critical thinking skills that we need, because although we know what's coming in the future, we don't know exactly what form it will take, what options we'll have, and we'll need to be able to think through these new scenarios in this climate changed world to have the most flexibility to exercise our options that the communities will choose to deliver to themselves and define how they'll be living in this climate change world. So with that, it's I wanted to just put forward some practical applications for what I think are, from the experience that I've had, are important. And these critical thinking skills are necessary to have a common operating picture with intersecting views for what we think of as climate change. We won't all agree because the view won't be the same across communities, but having critical thinking skills will allow us to agree on the facts of climate change so that we can start at a place instead of debating whether or not climate change is happening. So I think that that's important. It lets us not waste time with a discourse that is not taking us to a positive place. I think the critical thinking skills are important to enable negotiators and to have people that are savvy in finance, because part of the resilience and the response will require big projects and large actions to come to communities. And we want communities to be able to manage their own response to climate change. And that takes financial savvy and to be able to negotiate what it is that you need. Workforce development is another theme that is important. I hear this talked about a lot in the circles when we're thinking, okay, well, what is it that your island needs? Well, workforce development, how to develop and maintain skilled workers that are trained to do, whether it's solar or community grid or what have you, people that will stay at home and work on these issues. And then critical thinking, again, to have skill sets that are in the community that can monitor the climate change and also the success or develop initiatives that are different than what's being employed. People that are savvy on the ground, that know what's working and what's not working. So, and the last thing that I'll mention is the idea of preservation techniques and what cultural preservation for places and artifacts and cultural practices means. And this, I think, is another area that we need people to be able to be supported and engaged in this. I mean, while we're combating climate change on a physical level, the cultural level is also a space that we need to shore up. So I have lots of examples that I'll wait for the discussion to share, but these are some of the practical applications that I've seen in my experience that I think are important for us to live in this climate changed world.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Midori. And for those of you in the room, you will have noticed Midori talking about whether people believe that climate change is happening or not. And this is an interesting part of the conversation that we will get into later. There's the science, and we know that 99% of the scientists agree that climate change is happening. We're seeing extreme weather events all around us. Hawaii just experienced the worst wildfires with the most number of deaths in the United States. And yet we're also seeing a lot of mis and disinformation from interested parties. So I want to ask a show of hands from the room. Is everybody currently studying climate and the climate crisis as part of your curriculum? Can you put a hand up if it's part of your current studies? Oh my goodness, I'm not seeing anybody. Wow, can we try the opposite? So those of you who are not currently learning about climate, can you raise your hands? Should be the rest of the room. Now there's some who are on the fence here. Okay, so I'm going to perhaps tell you a little bit about my personal experience and how I came to think climate education was so critical. A few years ago, I was New Zealand's ambassador to the United Nations, and we were negotiating the Sustainable Development Goals. And at the time, goal on climate, goal 14 was being talked about, but in advance of the Paris Accords. And I am very ashamed to tell you that back in 2014, the vast majority of all of my colleagues really didn't think it was a big deal. Now, fast forward 10 years, and we are seeing already last month 1.6 degrees Celsius surpassed for the first time. So things have moved a lot faster than we thought. And I was privileged to meet a philanthropist called Wrigley, who is the name in the Arizona State Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory, who really opened my eyes. And I thought, wow, it is so important for us to be addressing these issues. Julie founded 20 years ago the first school of sustainability in the world and the first global institute of sustainability. And about 5 years ago, she said, well, sustainability is no longer enough. We really need regeneration because we've done so much damage to the planet. We need to be thinking about regenerative practices. And Midori mentioned that when she talked about cultural as well as environmental preservation and the importance of the linkages. So the philosophy of the Wrigley Global Futures Lab is that we need just and regenerative global futures, both grounded in indigenous wisdoms and leveraging high tech, so that we can also bring in all perspectives, deliberately multi-stakeholder and transdisciplinary. And when I went to university, I'm an economist and I wanted to study French. And it was the biggest battle because the economics department said French is irrelevant and the French department said economics is irrelevant. Well, I went on to be an economist at the OECD in Paris, at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and I needed French. But it gives you a sense of what the thinking was like 40 years ago. So now we really believe that we need climate education and transdisciplinary approaches to be fully integrated into degrees. So we're so grateful to Istanbul University on the forefront of research and science in Turkey to have welcomed the World Academy of Art and Science to really think about these issues and talk about how we can integrate them. Midori talked about green jobs. 2/3 of the jobs by 2030 haven't been invented yet. So for you guys, it's really important to have, as she said, the critical thinking skills, the intersectionality, the ability to engage in communities and to respond, and the knowledge of these jobs of the future, which are going to be probably, for 2/3 of you, the jobs that you will be going into to help save the planet. So I'm going to move now to our second online speaker, Professor Nicolaos THEODOSSIU from the University of Thessaloniki, who is a brilliant scientist. And Professor, I want to ask you, from your perspective as the director of the postgraduate program of the Protection for the Environment and Sustainable Development, for all these brilliant young people in the room who are thinking about their futures and their educational pathways, give us a sense of how you are adapting to ensure that your students are well equipped for the coming climate crisis.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to participate to such an interesting panel and topic. I'm really excited to be a member of this panel. Just a couple of things before I answer to your question. I wanted to say that, as you said, I'm a professor at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece. I'm also directing this postgraduate program which focuses on sustainable development and protection of the environment. And I'm also chairing one of the United Nations networks, which are called Sustainable Development Solutions Networks. The network that I chair is the one for the wider area of the Black Sea. So it comprises 12 countries, most of the Balkan countries, all the countries all around the Black Sea, including Turkey, of course, which is a valuable partner in this network. And in this, the goal of these networks are to mobilize the scientific community, including, of course, students. This is not something that we need to forget, to provide new and innovative solutions for the implementation of the SDGs. And of course, one of the main goals of the SDGs, one of the center goals, is climate change. So what we are doing with this networks is that we are trying to identify especially the research that is performed within the universities and make it more tangible and combine it with the research that is performed in other networks or in other universities, introduce the research results into teaching and into education agendas, because this is the most important thing, to communicate with young people, with the young generation, to make them understand about the challenges that we will face, especially in the future, that are dependent on climate change. As you mentioned earlier, we are facing we're facing a speed up of the impacts of climate change. We are facing now things that we expected to happen, but not now, in a few years. And we are identifying these effects in areas of the world that we didn't expect them to happen. What happened in Valencia recently is something that needs to take us back to the drawing table and start discussing again why it happened and why we had so many casualties. And how is this connected to climate change? Is it just climate change, or is it other things that we need to combine? So what we are trying to do, especially with the younger people, is try to engage them in this process of dealing with climate change on both levels, on mitigation and adaptation, because especially regarding to mitigation, is their future we are talking about. It's our present for everyone about adaptation, but it's their future about mitigation. So we need to engage them, we need to involve them, and we need to convince them, we need to educate them correctly, to present them with all the scientific data that we have in our hands, and to make them more active. And they are active, I'm sure they are, to help everyone to face this challenge of climate change.
Terrific, thank you very much. I want to ask a question before we introduce the former minister of the young people who are here. The points that were made about young people's futures are really important, but it was actually Fridays for Future and a young Swedish girl sitting on the steps of the Swedish Parliament by herself that created a massive youth movement that really brought attention to the climate crisis. So it is your futures, and we oldies have not been doing a good job definitely. So I wanted to commend all of you. It's an amazing packed room, which shows just how important this issue is to you. And Minister of so many important portfolios, we would love to hear from you about your perspectives around climate education. What is happening in Ireland? And in your role with the Inter-Parliamentary Union, what do you see happening in science and technology in the 181 member country?
Thanks, Amanda. First of all, can I ask the audience here, anyone here who is not doing medicine, put up their hand? You're all medicine students, are you? Yeah. So, look, you were asked the question earlier, are you learning about climate and the impact of climate? And I was surprised to hear that you weren't. So, I'm going to bring this down to your own, the impact in terms of your own careers. In Turkey, there are 1.8 times more people dying each year from poor air quality that died at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Each and every one of you are going to be dealing with patients that are going to be presented in front of you with the impact of air quality. In Ireland, 1 in 5 children in Ireland suffer from asthma. 1 in 13 adults suffer from COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Why we talk about air quality and climate debate? The reason I talk about air quality is that air quality is the opposite side of the same coin. Because most of the air quality issues that we have here in Istanbul today and in most cities across the world are as a result of fossil fuels or the burning of solid fuels, all of which are related in the long term to climate emissions. And if we can improve the health outcomes for people today in terms of air quality, we can also improve the long-term impact of climate on our environment. And by improving air quality, we can improve the health outcomes. So as Minister for Climate in Ireland, one of the projects that I developed was very much looking at the co-benefit between air, patients, and energy efficiency. And what we did was, we took some of the most deprived communities in the city of Dublin. We retrofitted those homes to reduce their energy emissions in terms of insulating their homes, replacing their heating systems with energy efficient heating systems, taking out solid fuel out of their heating systems. And we asked the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine to do an evaluation of that. But the London, and we specifically targeted homes where there was either an asthmatic or an older person with COPD. And the outcome from that analysis by the London School of Hygiene was that patients were attending their GP less, they were being prescribed less antibiotics. If they were being admitted to hospital, they were their admission to hospital was shorter, and one of the longest stays in hospital of any patient in the Irish health system is patients with COPD. They remain in hospital 2.5 times longer than the average patient in hospital. So if they were being admitted less to hospital and their stay was less, that is a significant knock-on impact on our health service when 1 in 13 adults have COPD. We also found that more of those patients were being discharged directly back into their own homes rather than into a step-down facility. The patients themselves and the citizens found that their homes were far more comfortable to live in. So there was a social benefit as a result of that. So what we need to do in relation to climate is to look at co-benefits, like the one in terms of retrofitting homes with reduced energy consumption, but also improved indoor air quality, which improved the quality of lives for the people whose homes were retrofitted and improved their health outcomes and took pressure off our health service. And the one single biggest impact of tackling the climate challenge that we have today globally is in terms of health outcomes. We are now in a situation in the world where the next generation, its lifespan, is going to be shorter than our generation. This has never happened before. It has always been incrementally, we have been living longer. Now we're seeing that change because of climate. And that's why it is so fundamentally important to each and every one of you and to your day-to-day lives, because sadly, you are going to be at the coalface in relation to this. You are the ones that are going to be presented with the patients that are coming into emergency departments because of the impacts of heat, because of the impacts of poor air quality, maybe because of malnutrition, because they cannot afford to buy the imported food that can no longer be grown here in Turkey because of the change in our climate. And what we as global leaders need to do is to get off our high horse and stop talking down to people and start looking at potential co-benefits where one action can have a positive action somewhere else. And that's why what the World Academy of Arts and Science is so important in doing this concept of human security. It's about looking at the individual. Rather than looking at the global, let's look at the local. How can we improve the health outcomes for individuals? How can we bring climate and climate action back to a local impact in a local community and build that up into a momentum for national action and international action? And if we can do that, I think we can really change the whole global attitude, proactive attitude to addressing climate change in the medium term, but health outcomes in the short term. Thank you.
And mathematics, I really resonate. In terms of co-benefits, if you're all going to be doctors, you probably are not interested in this, but guess, I'm an economist. Can anyone guess what the amount of money we all contribute to fossil fuel subsidies is every year? And I'll give you a clue. It's not in the millions. Anyone guess? Wild guess, and I'll give you a price. Wild guess. 300 billion, did you say? It is more than 300 billion. Any other wild guesses? 1 trillion. It's more than 1 trillion. Any other wild guesses? Do I have an advance 3 trillion? Do I have an advance on 3 trillion? Per annum. It's more. On what? $7.1 trillion in fossil fuel subsidies. So crazily, when we think about co-benefits, think of all the money we could save. So 2 trillion in cash and 5 trillion in polluter not paying. And the International Monetary Fund estimates that were we to get rid of those subsidies, we would have a drop in emissions of 34% by 2030. And we need to get to about 42%. So we would be 3/4 of the way there if we were not just using our taxes to subsidize the fossil fuel companies. So that's another very important co-benefit along with the health co-benefit. And I want to issue a challenge to all of you. Every 5 years, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change asks countries to put forward more ambitious commitments, and they're called nationally determined contributions. They're due in February. So please write a letter to your local representative. Tell them that you don't want $7 trillion a year spent in fossil fuel subsidies annually, and you would like Turkey to make more ambitious contributions because of all the co-benefits that you have heard argued so brilliantly. And for those of you who've got phones or tablets with you, please Google Parliaments for the Planet, and you're going to see a number of tools that have been developed with the Inter-Parliamentary Union, including climate trait, tracking real-time atmospheric climate emission, and you can find out for Istanbul, what is the biggest source of emission? You can also look up your climate laws on the next little video down in terms of the database. And then the third video tells you about the subsidies. So it's a very good tools, given that we have an expert here from the Inter-Parliamentary meeting. I'd like to come back to Midori to talk to us a little bit about this idea of mis and disinformation. In American schools, 1/3 of schools only teach that climate change is happening and it is person-made. 1/3 teaches we don't know, and another third teaches it's not true. So you can see that there is a huge challenge. I know people are shaking their head. There is a huge challenge with deliberate disinformation, and the fossil fuel lobbyists are 10-1 on Capitol Hill in the United States. So Midori, please tell us a little bit about the challenges of mis and disinformation, especially facing young people and students in terms of how they know what is real. That is going to be.
All right. Thank you for the question. That's a big question and it's a tough one. Of course, the result is easy to see with all the contentious debate that we have, and all the energy that we're basically wasting in this debate because we have not invested enough, in my view, in our education, to allow people growing up from a young age to engage in critical thinking and this discourse and to evaluate information as is it real, is it not real? I was speaking to some educators just this last week in the climate space, and they said we need to get to the young students and we need to expose them to this information as they're growing up. And I thought, well, yeah, that's very true. What happened to you? Why did you get into this business? Well, I saw a cartoon when I was young, Captain Planet. This is our climate change coordinator telling me a story about being exposed at a young age. And so I think, Amanda, as you mentioned, there's such a diverse teaching curriculum across the country that I'm in, that we can't help but end up wasting energy in debates because people aren't exposed to a common view growing up. And this, I think, we need to work to combat. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think what's interesting is that for those of you who are familiar with the educational body at the OECD, what's called the WAAS, the International Student Assessment, is now going to make climate compulsory by 2028, which means that ministries of education all over the world are going to have to start thinking about how are you as medical students going to learn about this. And as the former minister said so eloquently, learning about the co-benefits and then thinking about how you as individuals need to tailor your own profession to be prepared for what is coming inevitably with the climate crisis. Professor, I wanted to move to you in our last 15 minutes now and ask about solutions. What is it that you see has been most successful in terms of the kind of climate futures education that you have been engaged with as part of SDSN, where Turkey plays a prominent role?
Sorry, you addressed the question to me?
Yes, thinking about
Yes,
moving
yes.
from the mis and disinformation to solutions, what are some of the things that you have found to be most effective in the integration of sustainable and climate-focused education, especially within the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, where Turkey plays a prominent role in the Black Sea Group?
Yes, Yes, of course. First of all, I would like to point out that along these networks, the Sustainable Development Solutions networks, there are also youth branches of these networks. So there is an SDSN Youth Black Sea, there is an SDSN Youth Turkey, which is a very active network, and I would like to invite the students who are following this discussion to look it up and to join. These are very, very active networks. I really love working with young people. They have some such brilliant ideas and a completely different and more productive way of communicating. So these networks are really very, very important. The youth branches of these networks are really very important because they are networks organized by young people, addressing young people. This is really very important in order to overcome all these obstacles that we have during the communication of the traditional communication between professors and students, which is something that creates silos and creates a distance, introduces a distance between the two communities of universities, which is meaningless. We need to come together with the students and work together with the students.
That sounds brilliant. And I would like to come and finish with some more solutions. Tell us a little bit about what has worked in Ireland, what hasn't and why. You told us about the title in Hawaii. I'd love to hear more about that. And what's happening within this IPU think tank?
How long do we have? So maybe just to finish off with the medical students here in terms of air quality, because the points I've just raised are here and now. We also know that air quality is now associated with earlier onset of dementia. We also know that air quality has an impact on children's ability to learn. And for the guys in the audience, it also has a big impact on male fertility. So I think climate change is something that you should be all very conscious.
The list is not complete yet.
and the list is not complete.
Yeah.
And this is all related to climate change, because remember that governments around the world are spending $2 trillion directly in subsidies, in actually subsidizing the fossil fuels that are causing all of these negative effects, as well as turning a blind eye to levies of $5 trillion. And all of this is having such a negative impact on your day-to-day lives. So what we've been doing in Ireland, which has been really successful, has been taking this concept of human security and bringing it down to the local level. So two things that we've done in Ireland is, one of them is we have started a national conversation on climate change, talking about the double-edged challenges, the impacts of air quality, the impacts of flooding. We've had communities that have had to be evacuated permanently, homes that have had to be closed permanently because of persistent flooding. So we actually went down into local communities. We got the global and international experts on climate change to come and meet face to face around a round table of 10 people and let the experts explain what's going on globally and the impact, but for the experts to listen to the impact that this is having on the ground in communities, where the locals along with the international experts can share their knowledge, local indigenous knowledge with international scientific evidence, and to come forward with a series of recommendations. In tandem with that, we work with young people and older people who've taken an interest in the whole area of climate change and asked them to advocate on it, to explain the impacts, the negative impacts, and the positive steps that we can take through our Climate Ambassadors program. And these have been two very successful programs in engaging directly with individuals, in talking in plain language to citizens around Ireland about the real impacts, because the difficulty with climate change is that most people that lecture you, and they do lecture, tell you what you can't do. Very few actually talk about the positives in taking action. And, you know, there are parts of the world where they deny climate change, but they have big problems with air quality. So regardless of climate change, let's focus on the air quality. In a country like Ireland, we're a net importer of significant amounts of fossil fuels, and yet we have an indigenous source of renewable energy off our coast, offshore renewable energy. On a daily basis, we consume about 6 gigawatts of electricity every day. Off the west coast of Ireland, the Atlantic Ocean, we have 70 gigawatts of electricity. We have enough potential electricity there to not only supply our domestic needs, but to supply the domestic needs of France and Austria as well as Ireland. So even if you were a climate denier, it makes economic sense to become self-sufficient in energy. And the most effective way to become self-sufficient in energy is through renewable energy. Yes, there is an upfront cost in relation to it, but over the long term, it makes the best value, and it's a sustainable fixed price. It's not like oil that can go up and down, or gas that can go up and down. Now, I don't remember it, but I'm sure some of your parents or your grandparents definitely remember the oil crisis that we had in the 1970s. And at that time, governments made a commitment to not to be so dependent on fossil fuel imports. We are more dependent today than we ever were, and yet it is having such a detrimental impact on our health. So that is the reason why we in Ireland need to address this, not just because of climate change, but because of the health of our own communities and our own economic independence. And it's the same for Turkey. It's the same for every other country or most other countries on this planet today. And it's about looking at those co-benefits, building on those, and taking action that will make a real difference globally.
And what a perfect ending. We are right on time. Fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you, panelists. This has been a wonderful session. And please, I want all of you to come and see me. I've got a little something for everybody before we end. Co-benefits, coming back to the importance of critical thinking, intersectionality, community engagement and response, workforce development and green drives, regulation techniques, and of course, this focus on the co-benefits. Thank you all so much. As Margaret said, it's not